Let's talk about ego and the role that it plays in our favorite fictional characters. To start off, I want to say that I think ego gets a really bad rep. When you hear ego, you probably think of cockiness or arrogance. And while that is true at times, it often isn't the case. I mean, by definition, ego is defined as a person's sense of self esteem or self importance. You are your own ego, there's no running from it. And if you have a weak or undeveloped ego, chances are you're a shy and unconfident person. Of course, your ego can also get too big and prevent you from leaving your comfort zone or seeing other people's perspectives, but that gets into an entirely different discussion about the breakdown of one's ego and the roles that the ID and superego play, which aren't what this video is about at all. Instead, I want to focus in on some of our favorite characters from anime and see the different ways that they embody and grow through their egos. The GOAT, Satoru Gojo, is one of the most obvious examples of a character with a big ego. I mean, come on, he literally calls himself the honored one throughout heaven and earth. But Gojo's ego, despite being enormous, is still an accurate representation of his boundless power and talent. The show literally says that the day that he was born, the balance between sorcerers and cursed spirits shifted. And this is what prevents Gojo from crossing the line between being cool and confident and being cocky and annoying. Just imagine if anybody else in Jujutsu Kaisen, other than maybe Sukuna, acted like Gojo does. They'd be corny and unbearable. I mean, just picture Nobara saying throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one, just to get turned into soup by Mahito 2 seconds later. The JJK fanbase would have a field day with that. She'd get absolutely clowned on and it'd become Jogo Stin proud brain rot all over again. But when Gojo does it, it's peak, and it's one of the most hype moments in all of anime. Gojo's incredibly large ego makes him free in a sense. He says whatever he wants to the higher ups and he kicks his feet up on their tables because he's so confident and secure in who he is. And that's really one of the coolest parts of Gojo's character. Other people can hate him, mock him, or even disrespect him, and most of the time Gojo just doesn't care because his ego is so developed and indestructible. Gojo's ego is like a superpower. It's a core aspect of what makes him the strongest. In any and every fight we see Gojo participate in, he's always the favorite. Even against full powered Sukuna, Gojo calls him the challenger. Not only is that really, really cool, it also gives Gojo a tactical advantage. Not once is Gojo ever scared of an opponent, nor does he ever let the pressure of everyone else's fate lying on him affect him. Gojo's able to accept it and keep moving forward because he's comfortable in who he is, the strongest. And I think that a lot of people's misconceptions about Gojo can easily be refuted by debunking common misconceptions about ego itself. One of the most popular and controversial examples of this is whether or not Gojo has a god complex. This was a massive debate among the JJK fanbase when season 1 of the anime was ending. But by now, most people have come to the same conclusion that Gojo does not. And the reason for this is despite Gojo embodying nearly all the traits that make up a god complex, like immense belief in oneself, seeing oneself as better than others, and believing that you can control the world or people around you, he still doesn't have a god complex because he's able to back it all up. Think about it. Gojo is objectively better than practically every other character in the show. He easily has the power to change the entire Jujutsu world, and most importantly, he has every reason to believe in himself. But what if you don't? What if you're just a normal person in a normal world? What role does ego play then? Well, that takes us to the second character I want to talk about in this video. My boy, the egoist, Isagi Yoichi. But Isagi isn't like Gojo. He isn't all powerful, and in fact, he's practically worse than everyone else he plays against. I mean, dude, he's literally ranked 299th out of 300 players. But despite this, he outright calls himself an egoist and has an enormous ego. You'd think that his ego would be a negative trait, since he's unable to back it up in the same way that Gojo does. But in reality, his ego is the very thing that lets him survive and even thrive in a setting where he should be the weakest. Let me explain. Blue Lock makes it very clear to us that all Isagi really has is his mind. He's not super fast like Chigiri or technical like Bachira, but he does have vision and a really high soccer IQ. But along with that, Isagi's hidden and greatest weapon is his mentality. Isagi's mentality is filled with ego. He clearly thinks that he's better than he is, despite having no proof or evidence to back it up. And while this may sound foolish, it's the very thing that allows him to bridge the gap between his average self and geniuses like Rin and Nagi. You see, soccer in just about every sport or competition is a mental game just as much as it's a physical one. And Isagi's mentality is by far the strongest of anyone in the entire show because Isagi is able to believe in things that no one else on the field can even imagine. It's the very thing that makes his metavision possible because he's able to see outcomes that are so complex and unlikely that no one else is prepared for them. It's also why he is able to devour players. In soccer, when two players face off, it's all about confidence or ego. Whichever player is less confident in their abilities and decides to hesitate for even a second is nearly always the one destined to lose. It's why so many amazing players like Rashford and Hazard lose their form and become a shell of themselves within the span of a season. But thanks to his ego, Isagi goes into every game like he's the best player on the field, even when it obviously isn't true. But this is a massive advantage for him, allowing him to always play at a level equal to or above the best of his abilities. And not only that, overwhelming confidence, whether it's deserved or not, is contagious to opposing players like a plague or disease. It causes players who are physically much better than Asagi to doubt their own abilities and lose their own confidence, making up for the difference between their skill levels and allowing Isagi to devour them now that they're on an equal playing field. Isagi is the perfect example of how an overly developed ego can help bridge the gap between dreams and reality by making up mentally for what a person lacks physically. I hope by now you have a better understanding of what the ego is and how it plays a vital role in the development of your favorite characters. Now, of course, the ego can be bad and it can lead to arrogance and pride, but it also can be a tool and help a person grow into something greater than what anybody else could have ever imagined.